So welcome everybody. We have 2 days together, and I guess really what I'm going to try and hope to impart on you is some of the enthusiasm and passion that I have for photography that I've accumulated with being a photographer for about 40 to 45 years. And we're going to do that by first looking at the work that you've taken. We're going to comment on that, feedback on that. That'll probably take most of today. This in itself is a very valuable exercise because we can all learn from other people's achievements and mistakes. And then tomorrow, I'm going to give you a small exercise tonight to go and shoot some pictures, but we're also going to be socializing together. This is important to get to know each other as a group. And then tomorrow, I have various tricks up my sleeve that I want to show you and talk to you about. I shall show my own work. We'll probably go and visit my workshop, which is a 5-minute walk away. And of course, I want to invite you to come up with other things that you might want to discuss. We can talk about books, we can talk about the process of editing, whatever really emerges. We won't be short of things to discuss for our session tomorrow. So the first exercise is for you to show your work. And we don't know anything about each other, so before you do that, can you just give us a few minutes just telling us a bit about who you are? Are you a photographer? Are you an amateur photographer, a professional photographer? Why you're here, anything like that you think is relevant, where you live, and anything else you want to tell us. And then we're going to look at your work. I'll ask you to explain the work. We'll look at it. We'll get some comment. And of course, I want to have and hear comments from everybody here as to how they respond and react to the work that we see. You know, the point of this is that it's very much a fluid event where we work together about understanding what's going on in photography.
This was a project I did at the end of my course at LCC. It was really a last-minute thing, but I really liked it. The project sort of turned into portraits, I feel. And I was attracted to photographing kids purely for maybe the clothes they were wearing, their faces, just their style, their character. I also like the kids that were sort of dressed up in their princess outfits and they go out like that, and I quite like that idea. It's about being a child that you can actually do that.
This girl's smile here is one that sort of works. This is a good example that the photo really works well, despite the fact that it's a half smile. It's sort of just got that ambiguity. It's a very simple, clear picture. The balloon's in the perfect place. It just really works. Just going back to that last one, Suzanne. I mean, I think, again, it's a great portrait. I'm just a bit worried sometimes about your backdrops. They're sometimes too cluttered.
Yeah.
They don't help. Like that woman there with the red hair, just to the left of the 2 girls. I just wish she wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, this is actually a little bit photoshopped because one of the sisters, their faces were a bit obscure. They were looking in different ways. So I actually sort of put 2 pictures together here.
Whoa. How do you feel about that? Because obviously you could make everything better if you photoshopped it.
When it's things like that, when it's a really great picture and I can't go back and take another one, I'll do what I can to make it good. Mm-hmm. You know, ideally...
With a clear conscience.
Yeah, ideally I wouldn't like to, but, you know, I really like these 2.
What do people think about this? Is this a moral dilemma? Should we be photoshopping to basically camouflage our, I hate to say this, slight inadequacies on the shoot itself?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not insulted if I say that.
No.
You just slightly bodged up, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I think first off, when I do commercial work, which I do occasionally, there's no question I expect Photoshop, I expect lies, you know, by the bucketful. But for myself, I would never, as yet, combine 2 images, which I could do all the time to improve pictures. I just accept that it's another loss. We have to make personal choices as to whether we go down that road or not. I mean, Andrzej Gursky, the most successful contemporary photographer, photoshops everything, right? And I don't think anyone has any problem, and anyone would take away what he's achieved through his work. The ideal thing, Suzanne, is to be more aware at you know, when you're going through that rather difficult shooting process of all these errors that could come to haunt you after. Once we've got past that initial stage of understanding how a portrait functions and how it works, and you're obviously a good portrait photographer, there's no question about that, then you have to push it to the next level and make the pictures really, you know, really stand out in a strong sense
Yeah.
where how they're arranged and composed, the expressions, the ambiguity, all those other factors.
Yeah.
One thing to do is perhaps slightly more out of focus. So
Yeah, I
have you
think
thought
I
about
did.
that as a way of dealing with this clutter
Yeah,
that sometimes you have?
Yeah, I have possibly in the fair one. No, I would have done. I would have put it on. I possibly would have put it on 3.2 or 4, maybe even 2.8.
Are you shooting digitally here? And go as low at ASA as you can muster?
Yeah. Yeah, they were probably on 200, I reckon.
Where you can go down a stop. That immediately gives you another stop.
I didn't know that turning down the ISO could give you more.
Well, because you're going to have a smaller depth of field. Yeah?
Yeah.
So immediately you get more, the background will be more out of focus.
Yeah.
You see, I'm just slightly annoyed here. I mean, what's good about your work is it's really good, but I now see how you can become even better, right? But this is probably one of the best folios we'll see all day.
Oh, thanks.
But I mean, just little things like, it's just a bit annoying that the tent going into his head.
I know, and you know what? I did Photoshop another one out, and I started, but I didn't have enough information on another picture, and it was taking too long, and I was just like, is it worth it? But I do like him. He's quite...
No, the expression is fantastic, isn't it? What we're learning here is that when you're out doing these shoots, you've really got to persuade them to take your time. You've got to really consider and look more carefully at the picture and spot these things which are going to haunt you later, earlier, and get round them, don't you think?
Yeah.
And you have to have an armory of techniques like the ISO, the background, the soft diffusing flash if need be, up your sleeve. This is what's going to help you move forward as a photographer.
Yeah.
My name is Angelo. I come from Sicily, from Palermo. This year, in the second project, is more a passionate project. I focused on the people of this beach. I was fascinated to the order and disorder that create in a few seconds. In the disorder, I found this subject, no? These two people with the same chair. With the name is incomprehensible, but the name same on the chair.
I mean, what's nice about these big scenes is all these different people, different positions. Okay. That's what makes it interesting, okay? These two people are obviously the key element. You needed to be just a meter to the left, then we'd have had both their heads. You've got her poles, you know, unless he's purposely doing it, you've got her in that area here, and her head will be in here.
Okay,
yeah?
see.
I mean, you've got this potential to arrange all these different components and make them all look better. And you make them look better by giving them all space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm just making that point. This could have been a much better photo for doing that.
Okay.
What I like about here is the two people in these. This is great. So this is perfect. This is also pretty good, right? That's what makes it. Do you understand? That's what makes the photo.
Okay.
It's your observation, your line of view. And I mean, I like also the beach dots, you know, the people in the sea as the background. They're very effective.
Okay.
Okay, fire away.
So I'm Dennis. I'm from Boston originally. I'm a photography student in Rochester, New York.
Which college?
RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology.
So is there an underlying theme?
There's a very sort of basic idea of searching. I know that's very vague. Sort of searching and waiting, sort of looking for some goal.
Is this all part of your college work, or is this just something you've done?
No, this is something I've collected.
I mean, I think I like the ones, if the theme that you're talking about is this watching and looking,
Yeah.
the ones that for me work the best are the ones where you've got the individual, well first we have that, we've all like that, this guy at the back, you know, the individual people looking.
Mm-hmm.
These ones here where people are walking through, they don't seem to be helping us towards that as an idea. I do think it has to be less vague in order to help you communicate to your audience, or potential audience, what's going on.
Right.
Because you have an idea about what you're interested in, but we're dealing with a medium of communication. And remember, as I keep saying, you know, you won't be there talking through everybody. If someone walks into a show or they see a photo in a magazine, you can say watching and looking, but you can't actually say,
Yeah.
you know, this is a bit about that, that overlaps with this a bit. You know, you've got to be much more clear.
Right.
So the ones that are good, like, you know, I'm thinking this one. Let's have a look at this, just show everybody that. Whoops. This I like a lot. The bird one we've already looked at. The guy here, this guy. You know, these ones are the ones that are really succeeding for my money.
Right.
You know, we have a clear idea about what's going on. And then the others, you know, I don't understand, for example, what this, it's a nice picture. I think you put it in because it's a nice picture rather than actually contributing to this project.
Well, I put it in more for the sequence. So this sequence is sort of reactions, but you know, it's
Let me
not
get
clear enough.
Let me get this straight. It's watching, looking, and reactions.
Yeah.
It's almost too many subjects
too many
here.
things, yeah.
Yeah. Watching and looking is about the tops.
Yeah.
In terms of limits, because reaction is just too much, isn't it?
Right.
And I think that the single people in the landscape, like those two, they work the best. The verticals work the best because
Yeah.
they set up the right sort of framework for what you're trying to express. I mean, the whole reason why we have to enforce some discipline and rigor on ourselves is to make our goals achievable. We all want to be better photographers. We all want to use photography to express who we are. We want to find our vision in photography. But it's a very abstract thing. You can't just sort of turn on a tap and make it happen. So we have to use the discipline of shooting projects to help us achieve smaller goals in order that we can go on and produce a bigger goal.
Absolutely.
So the reason why I'm constantly saying to people, think of a project, follow it through, get involved, you know, go back to the fish market, get more involved in that project, is because it gives us the excuse to have a goal which is achievable.
Right.
Just to be a better photographer is unachievable in isolation. So we have to use these pegs and these props and support systems to help us improve and help us become more articulate and better photographers. So that's the reason why we have to set these goals. And that, I feel, is if you're trying to do too much too quickly,
Yeah.
you almost do, if you make your, I keep saying I'm very ambitious, but sometimes people try and achieve too much. So if you make something more manageable, then it's easier to grow as a photographer. You
Yeah.
understand? This is
No, absolutely.
And I don't just apply it to you, I apply it to everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone here has shown us some projects which is too grand, too
too
big,
sprawling,
and
yeah.
unachievable within the capacity and the time limits that we all have. So now we're starting to make some sense out of it all.
Right.
You know, so I think this suddenly relates easier to what you were saying.
In terms of these ones that seem to be more successful, I was finding myself, you know, taking almost the same picture. You know, the composition is very similar. And I was
Don't worry
wondering-
about that.
That's okay.
Absolutely. Because you may actually find that you want that composition all the way through.
Right.
It could become more conceptual.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you get a situation like that, you know, do start off with the vertical, with the person in the middle, then you can try other things as well.
Right.
Yeah? Because, I mean, these people are often there very quickly. Sometimes they're there for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's your chance to experiment.
Hi, my name is Liz. My photography style is very intuitive. I have studied composition and I've done 3 courses on photography. But the moment I press the button, or the shutter, sorry, it's just, I do it without thinking. And these are the resulting images. That's quite self-explanatory. I was, again, just walking around Warwick and was talking to people, you know, engaging. I love talking to people. I love finding out their history and their backgrounds. And it goes back to being quite nosy. But I'm not nastily nosy. I'm actually really interested in people. And this guy said, no, I'm not just from Warwick. I'm made in Warwick, and revealed his stomach. And I took that photograph. This is quite a classic Martin Parr shot. And there was no posing on my behalf. I was literally following the film crew around. And this guy just stood there, and it was just the time to take the shot. But in retrospect, I should have moved him either further left or to the right, so we could have got Volvo. So you could clearly see he was a Volvo man in front of his thatched Warwickshire cottage. This is from a year in the life of the Pumpering Gardens, where I was paid to document a year in the life of the gardens. This is the annual Leamington Peace Festival, and I was allowed to, I had to access all areas. And this was just a shot that presented itself, and I like the fact that his lips are pink, indicating that they've kissed, and I just love the blue faces and the pink
I mean, one thing to remember, Liz, when you're taking these photographs, you know, you can take more than one. So you can do that picture, but you can then also come back and do the full length shot. Because I want to almost see what their clothes they're wearing, you know.
Okay.
You know, you've got to remember things as simple as that. What clothes we're actually wearing today, which, you know, we all look around here and think it's pretty boring. In 30 years' time, remember, you're doing it as much for posterity as you are doing it for now.
Yeah.
The clothes that we are wearing now are going to be really fascinating.
Okay.
So
Well, when
always don't think
okay.
you've got to have one strategy for every portrait. You can do different things, and then you can use whichever one you need for that particular outlet or that platform that you've been working towards.
Okay.
I can also sense you're very scared to come closer, for example, in here. Out of respect for her, correct?
Yeah, I am way too conscious of not wanting to offend people and not wanting to intrude on their privacy, and this is a huge barrier that I need to get over.
Because I can see here, I mean, that's so long. You know, the picture works fine, but I can smell
my fear.
I can smell the fear.
Yeah, and but that's me, and I think part of my anxiety of photography, people actually disarms them, because I'm not this bold, big, brash photographer that says stand there and pose. I'm very apologetic, and it seems to work for me, but I need to get over that.
Yeah, you just need to be bolder, because
I know.
you know, you're not, you know, you're obviously, you wouldn't hurt a flea in a million years, right? And
No.
you know, your desire to have the photo should be so much more. Well, I know it's very clear that you're very motivated, but
I
that
love it.
motivation is the thing that's going to help you become a bit bolder.
This just illustrates awkwardness, I think, in when people are being photographed, because you've obviously got the guy in the centre who's very confident, very relaxed. Then you've got the guy on the left who's less so, and then the guy on the right who's even less so. But they're all on their phones. That's the
So
shot
this
that
is
I
one
took.
where I think, for example, the guy in the red shirt in the middle would be hugely better if he wasn't smiling.
Yeah, you're right.
So here's a good example where that
okay.
discipline would have paid off.
Yeah, you're right. And I should have said, hey guys, stop smiling, to look at your phones. But then it's that directing people. How much do you direct? Do you over-direct or just give?
No, direct just enough.
Yeah, just enough.
Are you using a fixed lens, or is it?
No, it'd be my zoom lens, my 24 to 70.
Because I think you're shooting consistently a bit on the long side.
Okay.
You should just be closer. This will help you be more involved.
Okay.
Yeah, you love to go to 70 and stay there as far away as possible. Yeah, it's all part of your scared of it mentality.
I'll come so close, I'll be just on their nose.
Don't worry about it.
I know.
No one's going to be cross with you. You know, you're not the sort of person people get cross with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've made my point. I don't want to.
No. And any feedback is welcome,
repetitive.
because I so want to grow and develop.
Thank you, Liz.
I like to shoot people, and I like to get lots of people in the frame, and I like there to be a somewhat odd element. I find that it holds your attention a little more. I try to avoid eye contact. I don't usually like people looking into the camera. I'm working in the tradition of street photography, just heading out into the world. I'm interested in people and their gestures and behaviour, interaction.
Nice cigarette on the right.
Yeah, that's for me. That's like the kind of the odd.
Now, can I assume that you wouldn't Photoshop two pictures together to make a better one?
That's correct.
Good. Just checking. I thought you'd be in that camp.
Right. For the commercial stuff, it's
commercial,
retouching
no
left, right,
problem.
and
Right. Now, anything goes. Yeah.
Yeah, but all of this is just
As is.
Yeah, not cropped. I never look at the people that I photograph after I've taken a picture. So there have been times that I'm aware that I've taken a picture and that person then is staring at me and thinking, what am I doing? Or did I just take a picture of them? And I'm very aware not to look at them, because I think if I was to look at them, then that confirms in their mind that yes, I'm interested in them, and I just take
And that you're
picture.
guilty.
Yeah, then I feel guilty, and then they might then go, then they might question me. And
I mean, as you know, the street photography market is quite a crowded one. Do you feel you've found your niche and your particular thing that you're going to bring along to that yet?
No, not yet. I've definitely got a lot more work to do. I quite like relationships and these moments where people are connecting.
Yeah, because one thing that's interesting is your narrative is generally quite strong, and yet often your compositions are a bit sort of messy.
Right.
They don't have that sort of symbiosis that can carry a street photo. So if we go back to that last one, you know, like I was saying about every component being right, this
Okay.
is something where everything is right, isn't it? You know, the woman in the green in the background, the number 7, the two fists, of course, even the guy on the right walking out, the little hint of blue shirt. Not many photos of yours where you can say that, where often the lead narrative is pretty good, but the visual composition is just a bit messy or it doesn't quite work. That's the tricky bit, isn't it? Is to combine those two things, to keep the narrative, which is the central player, that little incident, the small drama that's unfolding.
Quite often I'm not thinking about composition 90% of the time when I'm shooting, because I'll see something like, you know, a gesture, and I'll just react to it, and the moments are so fleeting
Fast.
that you know, I don't have that luxury of composing the shot.
I mean, I'm ambitious on your behalf. I'm trying to work out how you, I mean, clearly this is pretty good stuff. But how can you make it better? You know, how can you up the quality? So you have too many backs of heads in your photographs. I think blocking up a lot of space for that little bit of information to the left or right of that person. That's something you're going to have to be more aware of. And of course, we all know, most of the pictures that you take are rubbish, right? We all have to take a lot of rubbish in order to get something half decent. So the one message to you all, you're not taking enough rubbish. Do you understand? This is one thing you've got to learn from this weekend. More rubbish, please, because by taking rubbish, you can find something good. You are, like I said earlier, you have to understand. We understand the good by knowing the rubbish. Ruben, right. Ruben from Portugal. Whereabouts in Portugal?
Porto.
Oh, Porto, great.
I've been doing this project for quite a few years, and when I was doing my photography course, I did a work on an oncology hospital, and I noticed how much the people are very religious, especially in my country, and I thought it might be a good idea to start documenting the whole religion in the north of the country, which is a mixture of the pagan and the Christian events that go around. So I started to choose a few ones that are more peculiar, not the traditional processions that are just the saint coming out of the church to the center and coming back. Ones that are almost disappearing, like this one is really in the north, almost in Spain. This one is part of a curious tradition where when the saint comes arrives at the beach, everybody wants to touch it, hold it, and I caught this lady kissing the saint, so devoted. She was so happy to be with her. It's like a family gathering.
It's a very good photo. I love the way even the people out of focus really are fantastic. They work very well. The face on the right, just on the edge there, terrific. I mean, there's not a single component there that you could probably improve. And yet it has this very surreal, ambiguous feel too.
So this is the amount of people that gather to see the kids being bathed in the water. It's actually quite hard to photograph in the water with the kids.
We don't want anything to be easy.
Yeah, I don't want it easy. I usually pick up the camera and walk around the city and try to pick some things more peculiar to different from the everyday. This is another cliche.
I mean, you are, of course, with your pursuit of pilgrims, and
yes,
your street photography in Portugal. No. You're pursuing two of the greatest cliches in photography in themselves, aren't you? Have you not thought about trying to do something more original? I mean, just to sort of help you along?
Maybe, yeah.
One of the problems here is that, all the things you're doing have been done so well. How do we bring something new to the table when you know, the whole thing with pilgrimage is you know all the people who've done pilgrimages as photographers. I mean, I'm not saying for 1 minute that's not a reason to do it, because it's your pilgrimage, you're discovering it. No one's particularly done Portugal in the way that Spain has been done by Christina and such like. But, you know, one has to be aware of bringing something new to the table and to the party.
So here, it is a very special place. I thought it was interesting to follow the road of the people that do with the fishes.
I like that. I like the posing in that one.
Mm.
The guy on the right is very good.
What I thought it would be interesting is that to follow the fish, and every night they go in Ragis and buy their fishes. So at 5 a.m. I came here to shoot them.
I mean, this is a fantastic subject. I mean, it's almost need a vertical shot of him holding that octopus. Perhaps a little bit of, get the Gary Fong out. More about Gary tomorrow. A little bit of suppressed flash just to help it, just to lift up the octopus. The thing it needs is more explanation and more exploration. You know, you need to go back. You've done the difficult thing. You've established yourself. People know who you are. Take back some photos. And I mean, there are all kinds of things, like in the market, you know, there must be a place where they all sit down and have a coffee, or the bar. I mean, there must be so many more things going on than we're even seeing. You have great potential here, you know, in this project, and you need to just put that work in, bring back the photos, and just keep going night after night. And after a few nights, you'll just be accepted as part of the scenery. Okay. My appetite is whetted. Do we all agree? It's got real potential. You know, this process of getting yourself established, whereby people relax, you don't have to ask permission every time. That's so important in making the project grow. Thanks everyone for showing us your work. I think we've seen an incredible variety of work today, and some very powerful work. And I think what has been demonstrated is the people who've invested the time, energy, rigor and discipline have been the ones that have really shown what can be achieved. We've also seen, even with those people, amazing possibilities of what can be done in the future. I mean, part of the lesson that we have to understand and learn today is that ultimately, you know, you're out there on your own. You have to be in a position where you can learn from your mistakes. You can work out where to push your work forward, how to become more articulate, how to, if you like, find this vision that we all need to discover amongst ourselves or within ourselves to become a better photographer. I have one quick exercise for you to do tonight. I want to just really sort of free you up a bit, because we've seen a lot of very good portraits, we've seen a lot of very interesting photographs, but I want to just, if you like, give you something to, you know, just flex your muscles. I got a very short expression I want you to shoot. I want you to do a project called I Am a Fly, okay?
I am a fly.
I am a fly. And the idea here is that I want you to think about what a fly may think and take photographs as if you are a fly, okay? So you have to think about what flies may be interested in. You have to think about how they may propel themselves around a room, because one of the things that's happened is that everyone's rather rigid in their shooting. Everyone's rather sort of, you know, it's as if you're all pensioners. You haven't quite become old. You know, people are very rigid. I mean, sometimes if you're a portrait photographer, you have to be rigid. So this is really just an exercise, a little fun exercise, just to free you up. You have basically 18 hours. I don't mind if you work all night. You have tonight, you have tomorrow morning before 10. You know, you can get up early, go out and be a fly. There's lots of places in London where flies are around. But it's really just a nice little exercise to sort of flex your muscles and to try something out and just do something different. I'm very much in favour of pushing you and, you know, making you do things different to what you normally do. Because there's lots of very good portrait photographers here who perhaps wouldn't know how to think about being a fly. So it's just a really random exercise. It's a bit of fun, just to flex our muscles and to try things out.
Oh my God, these nerds!
Like paparazzi film.
It's a big of Martin's.
That's right.
Go.
Okay, folks. So this is my studio. I'm not here that often. I'd probably come once or twice a month. Sometimes I'm here for a couple of days. Sometimes I don't come for a whole month. So basically, there's 2.5 people working here. It's like a Canon convention, isn't it?
Has anyone got a nickel?
I do, but it's
Buffy does, but
I like my iPhone.
she's been stopped from using it. Wait for the wave of shutters now.
Oh, your nemesis.
Oh, Martin.
Don't smile, please.
Now workshop.
Socialist bastard.
Oh my God, it's hot under there. I don't process a single file myself. So they do everything. What I do is edit either on an Epson, which is this little portable computer thing, which I can load up pictures on and just courier or send it to the office, or I'll edit it on the big G5 here. And the other unusual thing that I do as a digital photographer these days is I actually print out everything onto 10x8 prints. So we get these prints here done as a, they cost about 50p each. They're from the high-res files, but they're actually on C paper. So when I was an analog photographer, I also made 10x8 prints, so I've kept that up. So I'm quite unusual. I don't think any other Magnum photographers I know prints out everything that they're interested in using. So it means I got a physical print of every single picture I'm ever interested in. Must be 500,000 pictures up there. I went to Bastille Day, first weekend of July, and the firemen do these balls at night. And you can see here, because I've used the time, it's a short shutter speed. It's got atmosphere. It is raining at the time. So it was literally raining and people were dancing. So the whole idea, there's smoke, there's people dancing with umbrellas. This is during the Bastille parade. But most of these are rubbish, remember? Most of these will just be rejected. But you know, in order to reject more efficiently, I need to have prints. I've already thrown that lot out. Most of this is all rejects, you see. Then there'll occasionally be something that I might want to use.
The percentage rate for the final edit, does that vary or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe 3 of these pictures will be used. I like to take them and then not look at them when there's no rush to decide, and then come back to the decision. So maybe this is quite good.
This, I like the shapes, that they echo the shapes of this, and they look like people in plastic bags.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of eerie.
So I'd say it's down to those
Yeah.
2, right? What do you think?
Lucky bags.
That one, you can look at that for longer though. This one is quite
Yeah.
straight there. Whether this one you look at for a bit longer.
No, I like that. I still think that's really
Oh, you're really helpful. Divided opinion, right?
Like for the
This is in the Louvre. It's completely bonkers in the Louvre. So look, there's lots of this idea that I've done. So, you know, once you see something that's working, you don't just do one shot and get out. This is watching the Mona Lisa in the Louvre in this craziness of the summer. Yeah, so one of these will make it, and then one of these, I don't know which one yet. Oh yeah, this I like. With the, you can see the iPhone pictures of the Mona Lisa.
Did you use flash for those pictures?
No flash there, because I wanted to keep the screen bright.
Yes.
Yeah? So these are the work prints, okay? All these boxes up here are the publications, magazines that I've had published. Let's just look at, say, this year. One of the best magazines in Europe now is D2 out of Norway. I mean, they do a really good spread, great commission. They commissioned me to go to Norway for the National Day, which is May the 17th. There's the 17th of May. Everyone's out on the streets. So really nicely laid out, good selection of pictures, good few pages. This is 100 photographs for press freedom, Reporters Sans Frontières. So this is about tourism. So it's basically twice a year they make this magazine. They take one photographer or one theme. They sell it only on newsstands. They do print 150,000 copies, and it sells for 10 euros. And they asked me to do one on tourism. And as well as doing the the pictures from stock, they also asked me to go to Cambodia and Thailand. These are the big prints that we do. This is why we had to have this chest of drawers made specially. Here, for example, is the front cover of the book I've just done on Australia. So you get an idea of the size of what we can print up to. It's really sharp, but it's not over sharpened. This is the book on Australia. For the front cover, we had to extend the sky slightly to keep the ratio. So I will occasionally do something like that, but just purely for the purposes of keeping the whole thing in the image. Okay. So if anyone wants any books, you should just let me know. Right? So I want to now just talk a bit about the whole business of the issues that present themselves with photographing people, because I still feel that a lot of you here find this quite a difficult thing to do. And I want to just talk around this because I see, when I seen your work yesterday, when I saw your work yesterday, I thought there were many people who basically would have been better had they not been quite so intimidated by the whole process of the business of photographing people in a public place who they don't know. If you meet someone and you're doing a portrait, you meet them, you say hello, you build up a rapport, that's much easier, okay? You can then go and say, if it's someone in a club or a pub or a factory, you can build up that relationship. We've talked about this as well, how important it is to take photos back, build the confidence. And this is a very productive way of making that connection that I've also spoken about, because remember, the thing that's important is to make the connection with your subject matter, whether you do it in person or whether you do it as a sort of, as a more of a notional thing. And one of the good things about photographing people is that it's not easy, because if it was easier, there'd be many more photographers who'd be very good. So the fact that it's so difficult, actually I really like, because to actually photograph people, go up and push your camera in people's faces is not an easy thing. First off, you've got to really want that picture, okay? If you don't really want that picture, you'll end up photographing your friends and your relatives. When I go to colleges and I'm going through photos of work, how many times do I see yet more photographs of their relatives and their friends for one reason? They can't be bothered to actually put in the energy required to photograph strangers. Part of what you have to do when you're learning and building up confidence is to understand the body language. Now, in the world, there's probably about 1 in 200 people who have an allergic reaction against being photographed. They get so niggly, so angst up by the very sight of a camera, they start frothing at the mouth, okay? So you're going to encounter that person sooner or later. But there are ways of getting around this, and the body language you use is very important. So if I was after getting you lot here, this is what I would do, right? So I'm wandering along, pretty oblivious, right? And I'm actually going to go to the position where I want to take my photo, but I'm not going to look at you lot. So I've decided about here is the right place, okay? I then come down, because there's nothing I dislike further. There's nothing I don't like more than distortion. So I'm coming down like this, because I want to be on the same level, okay? And then they're going to look at you briefly and think, what the fuck is this guy doing here? I'm getting my camera out, and I'm taking a picture here, just to tell them, in fact, that what I'm really interested in is photographing those people up there, but I'm actually doing it from here, right? Now, I'll be looking at these people sort of on the side view, working out who's going to be a problem. And I may even take up my camera, and I've decided you are a potential problem, Luca, okay? So I'm going to go onto wide, and I'm going to look at you by going onto the wide angle lens, and I can see what you're up to, right? And I can see, is it going to work? Is it a problem? I'm thinking, oh, he's relaxed now, he's sort of got over it. Okay, I'm focusing on here, and then I'm just going like that, right? I've got the picture. Now, here's an important thing. When you're taking the picture, you don't look at them waiting for them to say, what are you doing? You don't look guilty. If you look guilty, you're going to be guilty. So the moment I'm taking the picture, I'm back looking at this. So if they're thinking, there's a flash, I'm trying to give the impression that I'm not interested in them whatsoever. Now, I may find that they're actually not bothered at all, and I will then just continue shooting, right? And it may work out, I don't know. But that's the sort of body language tricks you have to play to try and make these things work.
A photographer said, compared the experience of being photographed being like it was a rape. And that's how I feel about being photographed. And then I read about Annie Leibovitz, who said it's their problem if they don't like being photographed. It's not my problem, it's their problem. And that kind of helped me understand the importance of just taking that photograph. But it's such a bold move. It's such a bold move. But it's this morning, going out and photographing, it was far more important that I got the shot than I didn't cause them inconvenience. And that's the first time I felt like it. But I was desperate to get this shot of this lady sweeping the steps of St Paul's, and it's a beautiful photograph, and I'm thrilled. So it does work. You've just got to step out of your comfort zone.
And the other thing you must be prepared for is that having that person react to you violently or gently is an occupational hazard. You know, there is going to be that one person in 100 or 200. And the danger is that you get one of those, it really can, even with myself, you know, who's been doing for years, it can really throw you back, but you've just got to understand that that's an occupational hazard. And you can't have it both ways, basically.
No.
But there are all kinds of these tricks that you can use whereby you can camouflage and sort of keep the sort of angst down. And looking and feeling guilty is one of them. It's very difficult to know, it depends on their tone. You know, I know that, for example, in the UK, I have the legal right to photograph anyone on the street, regardless of age, despite what anyone would say. So I often say to them, well, you know, it's my right to take this photo. Another thing I often mention to people is, do you realise you've been photographed 100 times already today? Because remember, the UK has more CCTV cameras than any other country in the world. And we're all photographed all the time. So it's a very difficult area to know whether you're working within the law or not. And each country, of course, has different laws. We may be in the last generation that's actually allowed to photograph in a public place. That's another reason to get on with it now, because it could be the last time you can do it.
Well, interesting.
In 30, 40 years' time, that freedom may have been taken away from us.
It is still legal, like you say. It's just that so many people, jobsworths, you know, jumped up traffic wardens who seem to have nothing better to do than go out and try and stop people from photographing.
Well, and of course the police can, make you suspect as part of the terrorism laws. You know, that seems to have died down a bit now, because the police have been taught to very clearly that you cannot just stop anyone wandering around and photographing willy-nilly. You know, we have a right to have that ability to photograph.
Do you give, if you have somebody ask questions, do you give them a business card, or do you just tell them, like, how do you deal with that if somebody's like, what is this photo for? Why are you taking it?
No, I have a press card, which I just get out. That usually, suppresses people's anger.
Okay.
I explain I'm a professional photographer. I say we were welcome to call the police. Not that I want to have the police called particularly, because it's going to be 2 hours wasted explaining it all and then finding that it's okay. So I don't really want to have that. If it's a rubbish picture, I'll also delete it, because it can't be bothered to hang around and spend hours discussing a picture I'm never going to use anyway. Normally, you show your pass and it's okay. I did get apprehended by the West Midlands police for photographing school kids, and in the end they did accept, when we got the Magnum lawyer onto it, that they had no right whatsoever to ask me to delete pictures, which I did because they didn't particularly want them. And rather than spend the afternoon in the police force or in the police station, I decided to just get rid of them and leave.
What about you was telling before that in 40, 50 years we will not be able to take pictures in a public space? So
yes, I think that's a possibility. So that's all the
example,
reason
now
why
that
you lot should get out there now while we can. Who knows what's going to happen? The nanny state gets bigger and bigger. Jobsworth mentality gets bigger and bigger. It's worrying times that we live in. We have to fight for our freedom.
It seems strange because you see people, an absolute mass of people now around with cameras. There seems to be more cameras and iPhones than ever before. But who knows?
Let's say you were to take pictures in a private space and you got permission from the people who owned it, but you were taking pictures of the people inside randomly. You could do that as long as, I guess it's up to the people who own the...
I would say that's consent as far as I'm concerned.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I don't worry about it. If you start worrying about it, then you'll never get anywhere. So we're now going to look at the fly pictures that you took this morning or last night. I thought what we do is the following. We just go through and look at everything quickly. And then we're going to go through again. We're going to vote just by a show of hands on the picture that you like the best. because we're going to do a prize for the best fly picture, which, guess what, will be a Martin Parr photo book. I've got so many of them, I'm trying to give them away, right? So let's go through and have a look and see what people did. Whose is this, by the way? We want to know who the author is. Right. I mean, it's a very straight up fly, Buffy. I think the fly spotted the right thing, but I'm a little bit surprised it's so straight.
I tried to
You can't help yourself, right?
I tried to get low, and I was gagging. It was very fresh.
Oh my God! Right.
And that's from inside a bin.
Oh right. Well, I think for positioning, that's pretty impressive. Again, it's very straight. Your fly is really straight.
Straight.
Well, it's like either vertical or horizontal. Flies buzz, and they're rarely horizontal or vertical.
I tried that, but it all turned out to be shit. Garbage. Good garbage. Maybe.
Okay.
Garbage.
Okay. Dennis. Yes, light. That's good. We all know flies like light. Again, very straight.
Yeah.
Yeah? You know, I didn't want to say that to people. Remember a fly flies, because I wanted you to think this through yourself. But perhaps I should have done. What do you think? No?
Yeah.
Well, some people may... Okay. That's good. That's a very good portrait of you, Shane. Very good. Good solution. Yeah? So this is a fly on a bus or about to get on a bus?
It was, the idea was the fly sticking, landing on the window of the subway, what it was seeing. And in the other picture in the morning.
Again, this sterility is off-putting. The neat flies.
I wanted to place myself in the picture as me being the the fly, the person or the animal capturing this.
You see, when you say that, it makes me think you should have been closer. You should have just come in and done here. Because you're saying now that's what you wanted to show, but in fact you distracted us because you showed something else. You showed the whole scene. How we position ourselves and our relationship to the subject is key to our understanding to our relationship to it. So positioning is everything. Not only finding the subject, but then positioning it in your camera, in your viewfinder, is you've got to get that right too. Everything has to be right to make sure that we're communicating what we want to say. Because now this picture is about the whole window. It's not about what you said. Yeah? That works. Where was it? Just in the hotel?
My room.
Yep. Yeah, now we have now the first flying fly, genuine flying fly. So you're to be congratulated for that. It's a breakthrough.
Wow.
That's quite interesting. Is that a carpet? It looks outside, but it looks like a carpet. I don't understand that.
It's on the sidewalk.
Is it? It looks like material, doesn't it?
I didn't know. It's not a carpet.
Yeah,
It was,
okay. No, interesting. Good thinking there. Now, I can see it's pavement now, but it does look like carpet. It looks like the bottom of a carpet, doesn't it? So this is you, Mark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I might have thought about it too much. I wanted to apply the behaviour of a fly to what I shoot. So basically, just like seeing something coming in, shooting, and moving on straight away. Yeah, but I mean, I enjoyed the exercise because usually I will linger in a spot and you know watch people and then sort of make my move, and then even after I've taken the picture, I'll still continue in that same area. But this it made me move faster and it was more fluid.
Chase away the fly. I'm the fly.
Yes, yes. No, no, I get it. Yeah. So you're getting this guy to help you, right? He was
Yes.
your number one assistant. Did he think you were mad?
No, no. It's a Brick Lane market.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, they're all
this
mad
morning.
down there, aren't they?
No, that's okay.
That's good. Yeah? I like your cast of characters you got involved.
This exercise here for me is important because so I can relationate with the subject.
Nice picture, but I don't understand its connection to the topic, but it's a great photo.
Well, you said I'm a fly, so I just walked on the street and met those guys and said, well, this is a concept. I'm a fly, so what would you do? And
Very
then
good.
they did that, so I
There
should.
you go. Well, that's good, yeah. Yeah, fair enough. This is late at night, last night, right?
Yeah, just after the drinks.
Good.
With the fly's eye, seeing 360 degrees with 800,000 lenses, I thought that would be a good overview of what a fly would see.
Because flies have eyes like this, don't they? Am I right in thinking that?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get distortion, but didn't want to do it through the computer. So wanted to find
Genuine concave.
Yes, genuine concave, which that was. The next one's a self-portrait. But the focus of that is the loo. It's not seeing me in the bath; it's seeing the loo.
You're not suggesting that you're attracting a fly here, right?
That wasn't my intention. Hopefully it was the toilet seat that
Yeah.
they'd be aiming for.
Okay, however clean it looks, it's always dirty, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Where is this?
In the apartment where I'm hosted. Because, as I said, I was thinking about Rodchenko, William Eggleston, and then I have some notices, and I wanted to do something more, and not just like changing my point of view, and I want to introduce myself in the frame.
If it is Rodchenko, or indeed a fly, why aren't we more at an angle?
Yeah, maybe from the bottom.
I think this is where your positioning would help to make that message clearer. Yeah? First, it's a fly, and secondly, it's a reference back to Rodchenko, who had everything at angles.
Yeah.
Yeah? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So this again is how you position your viewfinder, and your relationship to the subject. Can tell us a lot about your intentions. But I mean, a bold move. I mean, this is impressive, right? We were all sleeping, and he was creating this performance piece.
Yes, actually, then I started to think, and it came quickly in my mind Kafka, because of his thinking about insects. And
well, I'm unfamiliar with that as well.
Yeah, and so I wanted to be one insect, and then I did it. So I'm a fly, more conceptual, not so.
Right. Right. So who votes for this? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 1 because yeah. So congratulations. Okay, so good morning everybody. Now it's my turn to show some work and for you to grill me. And what I'm going to do today is talk about my career as a photographer. And I've been a photographer now for getting on for 45 years. And in the year 2002, I know it's quite a long time ago now, I did a retrospective exhibition which started literally half a mile or half a kilometre away from here at the Barbican. And this is the catalogue that they made to accompany that exhibition. It then toured around Europe. And what I'm going to do is to talk my way through this up to that time, and then I'm going to explain what I've done later. So I got interested and excited by photography by my grandfather. He lived in Yorkshire and he was a very keen amateur photographer. And when I was a teenager, I used to go and stay with him, and he lent me a camera. We went out shooting together, processed the film, made some prints. So by about the age of 13 or 14, I decided that I wanted to be a photographer. This is a dedication he put in a book that he gave me called Instructions to Young Photographers. I then went to study photography at Manchester Polytechnic, and photographic education is very different then to what it is now. In those days, there was no notion of an independent photography sector, so when you went to college, you were training really to be a photographic assistant, the idea being that after a few years of doing that, you become a photographer in your own right. Now, I rebelled against that sort of system and wanted to start off by doing my own work, and I created for my diploma show a living room called Home Sweet Home. You'll see the picture of it here. And then about 18 months later, the second photography gallery had opened in the United Kingdom, in York. The Photographers Gallery had opened in London the year before in '72, and they invited me to put the exhibition on that I'd done for my diploma show at the Shambles, the Impressions Gallery in York, and that's what you see here. This installation had rose wallpaper, it had a continually playing tape of the sound of music, and all these rather kitsch photographs that I'd taken that looked at how people decorated their houses at the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s. So here are some of the individual pictures. Most of these were framed very cheaply. I bought the frames from Woolworths, like this one here. This is a series called No Vacancies. It's showing bed and breakfast establishments. It's a black and white photograph that's been hand-coloured with the particular appropriate frames. Now, one of the things you'll see in people's living rooms are wedding photographs. So I decided I would photograph Princess Anne, who was getting married on the television in a house in Salford, and then put the photographs of me taking the television photographs in my living room. And this is what I call a bopper plate. Now, I'm fascinated by the whole idea of the different ways in which we see photography in our living rooms, in our domestic environments. I like the idea of trays and plates. And when you think of plates, you can think of people like the Pope or John F. Kennedy. So I did a series of bopper girls. These are the girls who'd be fans of people like the Bay City Rollers. Again, it's a black and white photograph, hand-coloured, and then stuck on an inappropriate plate. Now, I'm an obsessive photographer, and I think anyone who gets anywhere in the arts, let alone photography, has to be obsessed. And I got my obsessional genes from my father, who is an obsessional bird watcher. And when I was at college, I used to photograph the activities of the Surrey Bird Club, which is what he was president of, and this is one such photo. I call it Passing Naturalists. This is a small town called Hebden Bridge. This lies between Manchester and Bradford, and 2 years after leaving college, I decided to go and move there with some of my colleagues from the Manchester Art School, and we set up a workshop together called the Albert Street Workshop. And in this, I was able to show the photographs that I was going to take in the next 5 years as I documented this small working class town in northern England. Now, you'll note that all these photographs then are done in black and white. If you were serious about being a photographer in the 70s or the early 70s and the 60s, you were almost obliged to shoot in black and white. Colour was the domain of snapshot photography and advertising photographers. So this was almost by default, it had to be in black and white. So these are some of the photographs I took in and around Calderdale in Hebden Bridge. This is the Halifax Rugby League ground. And everything is very neat, everything in its right place, and it really tries to show the traditional aspects of life in this small town. And perhaps the thing that I centred on most of all were the small non-conformist chapels. This is Steep Lane Baptist Chapel, and I used to go and photograph these very regularly. Many of these chapels have since closed down, but I was catching the last days of these very small chapels in and amongst the valleys surrounding Hebden Bridge. This is Crimsworth Dean Methodist Chapel, and this is perhaps the one that I centred on most of all. It had a congregation of about 10 people. I got to know all the farmers who would attend this, and this is the annual spring clean just before the big anniversary service, which is the biggest social event of a small chapel. After a few years of doing this, I wanted to try and get away and do something different, and I came up with an idea which is much more conceptual of photographing in and around bad weather. In Britain, we're obsessed by the weather. We talk about it all the time. Even now it's hot, we're talking about it. And when it's in the winter and it's raining or not raining, we talk about this too. So I like the idea of picking up on the national obsession and doing a project in and around that idea. This is a very early photo from that project, shot in 1977. It's the Queen's Silver Jubilee street party, rained off. Now I decided to go out and buy an underwater camera and an underwater flash gun. Strangely, when I went to the shop and bought this camera, they told me I was the only non-swimmer that had ever bought an underwater camera. And I bought this in order that I could go out and photograph in the rain without worrying about getting water in my camera. So this gave me total freedom when it was pissing down just to go out and shoot. And this combination of flash and low light created these sort of blobs, and I started to use these and incorporate these into my photographs. So it's something that I discovered by accident and then started to use it as I felt it gave the atmosphere of that sort of low light with the flash and the rain and snow. It made it really work and very interesting. It was also during this time I began to question some of the aspects of what photographers are meant to do. And photographers love to go and photograph places that are very exotic, very interesting, very beautiful. And I wanted to try and fight against that. And I decided for this project, I wanted to go and find places that were very dull and very boring. So I went to motorway service stations, I went to supermarket car parks, just to see, is it possible to take an interesting photograph in a very boring place? And ever since then, I've had a very big relationship with the whole idea of boring and everyday. It's an aspect that I've explored in my work quite a lot. I also began to understand how subjective photography can be. Look at this picture here, taken at night on a tripod of a bandstand in the park in Hampton Bridge. And a few moments later, the same scene photographed with flash. So which one is telling the truth? We understand, of course, there are different interpretations of the same scene. So if this inherent subjectivity can be such a part of the photograph, I wanted to explore this a lot further and make the photographs a lot more of my own rather than the subjects. And this came out as a book in 1982. This is the first book that I published. And since then, I've done over 50 photographic books. And as well as making my own books and trying to find different ways of making the book work and making the book function, I've also become an obsessive book collector. And together with my colleague Jerry Badger, we've produced these 2 volumes. They came out in 2004, 2006, about the history of the photographic book. We're now working on volume 3, which will come out next year. And part of the reasoning behind this is to try and give the book more status in the history of photography. Now, I have a room full of photographers here. I think most of you, if I was to ask you, what was the thing that got you excited about photography? It's probably because you saw a book somewhere that got you interested. And I think in terms of the history of photography, the book hadn't been given the proper status that it deserved. So this project was very much part of the attempt to try and rectify this anomaly. As well as being an editor, I also often work as a curator. And this is Arles in 2004, which I was the artistic curator for. And then 2 years ago, the Brighton Photo Biennale, which is the biggest photo festival in the UK, I was also the director of. This is a Stephen Gill photograph, which we commissioned. I'm also doing a series of books for Nazraeli Press. They're called Parr Nazraeli. We're doing 10 books over a period of about 6 years. I think this is book number 3. It's by a Dutch photographer called Jan Banning. It's called Bureaucratics. He went to 8 different countries and he photographed the bureaucrats in those countries. So if you have a problem in Bolivia, this is the man you have to go and see. Now, I hated Mrs. Thatcher, and I couldn't believe that anyone would actually go out and buy a plate or a mug with her image on. And rather perversely, this is the thing that got me excited and interested in collecting Thatcher memorabilia, which I started doing about 10 years ago. And I've now built up a substantial collection of Thatcher memorabilia. And this whole idea of the objects and the things that I collect has become another part of my work as well. This is one of the photographic trays that I've collected. I love to collect trays with photographs on. I just love the whole idea of photographs serving with coffee and wine or drinks and with these really bad photographs on. This photo is so bad that it becomes good, and that's another territory that I like to explore as well. I collect watches with photographs of Saddam Hussein on the front, and for the Arles Festival in 2004 I did an exhibition of these, and this is a catalogue that was published to accompany this. And you'll see here, this is a fake Rolex with a photo of Saddam on. Early Saddam Hussein, and much later. So within a week of his capture, these were available on eBay to buy. And that's just an exhibition shot to show you how they all look good together. I think I've got about 80 different Saddam Hussein watches. This is a more recent collection. This is Obama ephemera. So when he was inaugurated about 3-4 years ago now, you could go to eBay and find something like 18,000 objects to do with Obama. I went through and tried to find the most ridiculous, the most bizarre examples. This is a pair of underpants from Hong Kong. These are flip-flops. And cereal. Hope in every bowl. This is another more recent collection. This is Osama bin Laden is dead. This is a skateboard with this on. And the same collection, this is So Long Obama Blood Orange Soda. And finally, Invite to Defeat Terrorism guitar with the 9/11 images on. And this is just a more recent watch collection. This is Gaddafi, of course. 39 in the middle there means 39 years of him being a dictator. They're much rarer, Gaddafi watches. If anyone's got one, let me know, I'll swap you a print. I just want to show you this. This is a very famous comedian called Tony Hancock. And I'm fascinated by the whole idea of irony and humour. And I think of myself as a British photographer that uses this device as part of my work. And I take, therefore, the whole business of comedy and irony very seriously. And this is one of the greatest British comics. Some of you from England would know him, but if you're from Italy, probably not. And that same vulnerability that the comic would demonstrate so well when they do a stand-up piece is often very similar to the vulnerability I'm interested in trying to demonstrate and illustrate through my own photographs. This is a Tony Ray Jones photograph. When I was at college, he was one of my early inspirations. He was a brilliant photographer who died very young in '72, but in the late 60s he did the most spectacular body of work in the UK. He was, if you like, the start of the whole renaissance of British photography, which kicked off in the 60s. This is a Chris Killip photograph, and when I saw this particular issue of Creative Camera, which came out in '77, I was really amazed, and a sort of chill went down my spine. And when those moments happen to you, you have to cherish it and nurture it. It's so important you take on board things that inspire you, and then you can help to make that inspiration part of your own voice and your own work. I love the Humble postcard. This is the M1, the first motorway in Britain. This opened in 1959, and when I was a teenager, we were actually taken onto the motorway as a treat. Can you imagine doing that now? And every service station would have a postcard available, more than one in fact. Now, of course, on the M1, there are no postcards available whatsoever. So I think the postcard shows us a lot about how our social attitudes change over the years. As documents, they're very valuable pieces of information. This is a colour photograph taken by someone called Roger Minnick. And in the late 70s, I began to see colour photography being taken seriously, particularly in America. That whole generation of Stephen Shaw, Meyerowitz, Sternfeld, Eggleston, that we all know and love now, were really quite obscure. Minnick was another one. And it was very exciting suddenly to see that colour photography could be taken seriously as well as black and white. So combined with the postcards that I started to collect as well, the bright kitsch colours that these have, and seeing this work from America made me change to colour in the year 1982. And the first big project that I did was called The Last Resort. And this is a series of photographs taken just down the road from where I was living about a rundown seaside resort called New Brighton, very near to Liverpool. So for 3 summers, I was photographing there with my 6x7 camera, which I just bought. I wanted to go up a format. I wanted the colour to be very sharp. I combine it with flash and daylight. And that's some of the pictures from that project. The idea here was to show how shabby and run down New Brighton was, but to put in front of it this domestic activity, because even though Liverpool and New Brighton were very run down, the kids and the families were still going there, and I wanted to contrast the domestic activity with the run-down backdrop. So it had a political edge to it, because I was very anti-Thatcher, and I felt that the north of England was run down and she hadn't paid it enough attention. The baby in the centre there is someone called Paul, and about 5 years ago I got an email from this guy. He was studying graphics at St. Martin's, and he was doing a project about my project, and we got in touch and he told me who everybody was, and I sent a print to his mother and it's very nice to get an email from a baby. And look at all the litter. Of course, I would go when it was at its most busy, so bank holiday weekends at the weekend. Remember, I'm creating fiction out of reality, so my job is to almost exaggerate reality and to make it look even worse than perhaps it is. So that's why when you're photographing something like this, you want to try and go when it's absolutely at its busiest. It's interesting, you probably wouldn't be able to take this photograph now because, as you all know, the attitude towards kids and photography has changed quite dramatically. So 25 years ago, people were much more laid back. So you couldn't even start photographing kids on the beach now in their swim trunks, let alone with nothing on. But look at that, and also the amazing rubbish on the beach. And this came out as a book in 1986, and many of these early books I self-published for no better reason that no one else would publish them. I was able to get a small grant from the Arts Council, so I designed, I got a designer in, I commissioned the text and packaged the whole thing together. The next project from the 1980s is something about supermarkets and shopping. And because of the Thatcher era, we suddenly were a nation that was believing in the whole idea of the shopping centre, the notion of the shopping community. And it struck me that as a documentary photographer, there's a certain obligation, if you like, to try and reflect the times that we live in. And this aspect of life hadn't really been looked at by photographers, because photographers, you have to remember, are very nostalgic. They love to photograph things from the past. I'm no exception to that. I'm always seduced by nostalgia. But at the same time, sometimes you have to fight that and try and think, how do we represent the times that we live in? So I decided to go and photograph in supermarkets and shopping centres in and around Manchester. I got a commission from the Documentary Photography Archive to explore this. This, of course, is M&S. And, of course, look how the graphics have changed. And bang in the middle there is a piece of broccoli, which is a very 1980s thing, because everybody was suddenly eating broccoli. And the decade before, when I was brought up as a kid, people didn't have it. So I like the small detail that show social change and social attitudes towards vegetables and how that does change over the years. Frozen food centre. This is Tesco's. And even something as simple as filling up with petrol. This now looks interesting to us because, of course, the petrol pump is no longer with us. It's all changed. But at the time, if someone said to you, go and photograph a petrol pump, like if I said that now, you say, well, that's really just too boring for words. So sometimes we don't understand how interesting daily life is because we're just so used to it, so complacent. Familiarity breeds contempt. I also wanted to photograph indoor shopping. This is a Tupperware party display. And here's a Tupperware party in full swing. After The Last Resort came out, I started to have an international career, and it meant that I was doing more travelling. I then expanded the idea of photographing supermarkets to other countries as well. This, for example, was taken in Ireland. Here we are in Spain. St. Petersburg in Russia. And the last project I did in the 1980s was something about the middle classes. Now, as you're probably aware, Britain is a very class-dominated society. And I'm so middle class, it's quite ridiculous. And I wanted to try and photograph my own class, because it struck me again, if you looked at what had been photographed by documentary photographers, they tended to go to the extremes, the very wealthy, the very poor, and the sort of middle ground where I was residing had been overlooked. And as I felt slightly guilty about being middle class and successful during the time of Mrs. Thatcher, it's almost as well as a form of therapy for me to go back and look at my own roots and my own class. So I started doing this. I had to move from Liverpool, about the least middle class city in the UK, and that's when I moved down to Bristol, which is where I'm still living. This is Malvern Girls' School. This is the Royal Commonwealth Society in Bristol, a summer function. The guy on the right is holding a peanut. I also wanted to photograph people I knew who had voted for Mrs. Thatcher. So I got in touch with the local Conservative Party, the party associated with Mrs. Thatcher, And they gave me a list of different events, and I went to the ones that were in people's houses. So this is the Bath Young Conservatives Midsummer Madness Party. Now, you can't photograph everything, so I wanted to do a lot of my shooting around the idea of my prejudices. And one of the things I really don't like are crafts and craft fairs. So that's the reason why I would go along to craft fairs and photograph those. Here's the reluctant wallet coming out again. And this is something, of course, I approve of. This is middle-class self-help. This is antenatal classes. So if you're middle class and you're having a baby, your partner insists on taking you along to these classes where you do breathing exercises together. And I said, of course I'll go if I can take my camera. Now, it's around this time that I started getting very excited about the possibility of trying to work for magazines. And I thought, if I'm going to try and conquer that whole world, then I should try and join an agency to help me navigate the difficult structure of getting work from magazines, and decided, having looked around, to try and join Magnum, what seemed to me the most interesting and the most difficult one to join. And so after a long period, I finally became a member of Magnum in 1994. There was a lot of opposition from Magnum photographers to my membership, but I did get enough votes to become a nominee in the late 80s, and this gave me fantastic access to the magazines. Now, in those days, of course, magazines had a lot bigger budgets and they were a lot more creative. It's a very different marketplace now. I had just started doing a project about tourism, and I was able to get magazine assignments to help me to achieve that. So this is done for the Telegraph magazine. This is particularly done in the Gambia. The great thing is I take these photographs and then I have them for myself so I could use them and incorporate them into my own projects. And even now I still try and do assignments. Often I'll just go somewhere and photograph somewhere interesting off my own back, and then use and show these and get Magnum to try and find a way of selling them as a set of photographs. About 5 years ago, I did this magazine with Magnum Paris called Fashion Magazine. I'd been invited by someone in Paris to do an exhibition of some of the pictures that I've been doing for fashion, which I'd started about 10 years earlier. And for this, we're able to put together a whole series of photographs from the different shoots that I'd done. And for this magazine, we decided every photograph should be taken by myself. So I did the society pages, and we also did the advertising. So we went to different brands and said to them, would you be interested in a Martin Parr ad in this magazine? They would often give us something, and then I'd go and photograph it, and this then became an ad for that particular brand. And this just demonstrates that occasionally I do advertising. I do about 2 advertising jobs a year. It's not my top priority, but the great thing is you get very well paid, and you can then invest that money in your own projects. And this is now the project about tourism. And this is a project that I initially did as a book in 1995, but it's something I'm always constantly interested in, and always am working towards doing more photographs. So we've done a 2nd edition, and eventually I'll do a 3rd edition. And I love this whole idea of the tourist venue, because here you can demonstrate the mythology of a place. When you think of a resort, say it's the Leaning Tower of Pisa or Machu Picchu, you have this idea in your head. When you get there, the reality is quite different. So photography is a very good way of demonstrating the difference between reality and mythology. This is Las Vegas. Here we have China. This is Ocean Dome in Japan. It's the biggest indoor swimming pool in the world. And it's on the southern island, and when the temperature reaches 30 degrees outside, they open up the roof. Just down the road is the real beach, which of course is entirely deserted. Around 1995, I decided to try and explore a different way of shooting pictures. I liked the idea very much of coming in much closer, and I went out and bought a macro lens and a ring flash. This is a combination usually used in medical photography, and this enables you to get in very close with studio type lighting. You get a flash on either side of the lens. The first project I did with this new combination was something about British food, and I very much like this idea of taking the notion of British food, a subject with lots of prejudice, and trying to find the worst examples that I could of British food. Here are some nice cakes, sausages, pink cakes. I then extended this to go and look at the whole idea of cliches, and I was commissioned to look at the cliches of Europe. So I went to 8 different European countries, tried to think of how to represent them through the cliches associated with that country, and then went out to try and find them. This, of course, is the UK, French snails, Germany, Holland. And all these pictures came together into an exhibition which I did in the spring of 1999. It was called Common Sense. And for this, we created an exhibition with over 250 A3 laser copies. And we were able, through the Magnum office in London, to send this to over 45 different venues throughout the world. So we had it in 5 continents, all showing at the same time in the spring of '99. Funnily enough, even though I've done many books, the book that I was responsible for that has sold the most is this one called Boring Postcards, published by Phaidon. And this explores the whole idea of trying to find places which were being rebuilt after the Second World War. You have shopping centres, motorway service stations. And I got fascinated by the whole idea of boring. I remember when I'd been to America a few years ago, I'd seen a signpost to a town called Boring. So I decided to make a pilgrimage to this town to see if it's possible just to find out what boring was like. So I spent 5 days going around photographing everything in the town of Boring. Out of all the places I've photographed in the world, I guess there's none that I've done more thoroughly than Britain and the UK. And I often like to do a book based in Britain. This is one I did in about 10 years ago now, called Think of England. This is a cover picture of this. And in about 2 to 3 years' time, I'll be doing a new volume about Britain, but about the whole of the UK rather than just England. So this one is called Think of England. And the great thing about me photographing here is it gives me a chance to express my contradictory feels about Britain and England. I sort of love it and hate it at the same time. And it's almost like a form of therapy where I can go along and photograph and explore the issues where all the contradictions and ambiguities can show themselves. And of course, the one thing we can do very well in Britain and England is make a good cup of tea and have a sense of humour and irony. So this is tea cozies, which is what you need to actually keep your teapot hot and warm, knitted by old pensioners. I like the fact that we're a multicultural country. This is an Indian family on the beach at Brighton. So now we've come beyond the retrospective, and I'm going to show you now a series of books that I've done in the last decade that, if you like, try and show different ways and platforms of presenting the book, where the production values are very much echoed and part of the whole book project. This, of course, is meant to look like a wedding album, because what you're going to see inside is something that's very precious. It's called parking spaces. And what I did, I went to 42 different countries and showed the last car parking space in that particular country, which you could have got if you've been driving along, but it's probably gone now. So it's something that's very precious, because one of the problems we have, whether you're in Melbourne, Sydney, Edmonton, we don't know where to park the car. So this is, if you like, is an example of a conceptual project. We were talking around this yesterday, and this, if you like, very much works in a conceptual way, because these photographs on their own individually don't really hold up. But when you put them all together, alphabetically in this book, it suddenly comes alive and makes sense. This is a project done about the beaches of South America. Over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of work in Latin America, and I often go during the winter here, where it's the summer there. And I wanted to put together a book about the beach pictures that I'd accumulated. This is called Playas. When you do a book as a photographer, we all want beautiful printing, no graphics. So here I wanted to do the opposite and have really bad printing, really terrible graphics, just to sort of get the whole point of the spirit of the book across. And when we did the printing, we also went to different printers, found a really bad printer, and encouraged them to make as many mistakes as possible. So you can see here there's no yellow going through the plate. And the best copies of the books are the ones with the most mistakes in. And here's the crescendo, where you actually get a bit of double printing only on one side though. This is more conventional as a book. And this came out about 3 years ago, called Luxury. And this is a whole exploration of wealthy people. And I'd started this just before the big global downturn in 2008. And that came along and I thought, oh dear, I've missed my chance here. But I realised that with the benefit of hindsight, this is a good way of looking back to that crazy bubble that we had about 5 or 6 years ago. So I went to places where I knew that I'd be able to see wealthy people enjoying themselves, drinking champagne, dressing up. So I went to art fairs. This is Frieze in London. Ascot in the UK, the race meeting. This is in Dubai. I went to all the BRIC countries and to the Middle East. This is Polo in Dubai. This is the big race meeting in Dubai. I decided it'd be interesting to go to South Africa, so I researched the biggest race meeting in South Africa. It turned out to be in Durban. And I went there, and of course you have the wealthy whites, but you also have now the new wealthy blacks, often being served by the whites. This is a Gucci store in Moscow. This store generates more income per square meter than any other store, any other Gucci store in the world. This is the Millionaires Fair in Moscow. This is a fair where you're able to buy anything that's really expensive, whether it's a complete wine cellar, an SUV, a helicopter. If it's expensive, you can buy it here. And this is the final project that I want to show you this morning. It's something called Auto Portrait. It's something I've been doing over many years. And it is, if you like, a celebration of the portrait studio and the different photographs that people have taken when they go and surrender themselves to have a portrait taken all over the world. This is something I just got interested in naturally when I would travel a lot and see these amazing studios. I'd often go in and say, can I have my photograph taken? And they would say yes, and I then started to build up this collection of photographs of myself over the years. And of course, two things have happened since I started this project. I got a lot older, look at me here, handsome young man 20 years ago. And the other thing that has happened is that the whole business has changed from analog to digital. So it's been a very exciting time to document and to create this album, if you like, of different photographs of myself taken in different ways. This is in Jamaica, and I'd often go in and say, I'd like a photograph of myself taken in that style. So they'd have a whole series of photographs up on the wall. I would then select the style and commission the photographer to have that photograph taken. This is something you don't see now. This is an analog photograph, hand-tinted black and white photograph. This is taken in Studio Hanoi in Havana. The sunglasses were provided by the studio. Perhaps the only place in the world now where you may still get an analog hand-coloured photograph is Pyongyang, North Korea. This is in Brazil. In Brazil they have a particular style where they literally paint over the photographs with oil paint. And I went and had my photograph taken there. And this is in Mexico. This is a traditional way of making carved portraits, literally with wood, with the photographs set in the backdrop. We found the last person who was still doing this style, and we commissioned 25 portraits of myself like this. And now we get into the digital era where anything is possible. You can be with anyone you like at any time, anywhere. And this is where the digital imagination of these photographers knows no bounds. This is done in Dubai. This is from China. They have this great tradition in China of creating wedding albums where the bride and groom will go in a couple of weeks before they get married, and they'll have a whole sequence done of photographs in different costumes. So I went in on my own and had this whole album made. And this I then made 10 copies of to make as an artist book to sell through the dealers. I can show you these things later if you're interested when we go visit my studio. Here's very creative jacket flipping from China. See, look and learn, you wedding photographers. This is a height of creativity. And this is a photograph I want to leave you with, taken in New York. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have. Any volunteers?
Yeah.
Okay.
How far ahead do you plan your projects? I mean, are the next 10 years planned?
Next 10 years? No. But certainly the next 6 months.
Right, okay.
I'm pretty certain where I'm going to be. I tend to book in my long haul trips, give them priority, because there's only so many long haul trips that I can do, maybe 6 or 8 a year.
Okay.
And then I work everything around that. So I know I'm going to Brazil, to Chile, to Argentina, and to China this autumn. Yeah, so I have certain ongoing projects, like the ongoing interest in tourism, the ongoing thing about photographing in the UK. So this week, tomorrow, I should be going to Clacton to photograph. I haven't been on the East Coast for a long time, so I want to catch up with that. And then finally, on Friday, arriving into Norfolk, where I'm working for a festival over Bank Holiday weekend. So this is a chance where this week I'll be doing my own work, and then at the end of the week, a commissioned assignment. So it's a combination of the two things. But often, of course, the commissioned work, I can be my own work as well. So you might get invited to do an exhibition, say tomorrow, later today I'll show you the book I've just done on Atlanta, which is I was invited by the High Museum there to come and do a set of photographs about Atlanta. So there was nothing was actually said about what I should do, so it's up to me to evolve a narrative, a dialogue. I went twice and did a body of work about Atlanta, but it was my own work. So it's not only commissioned, but it's actually my own work as well.
Right, okay. When you started off in the early years, you were doing a lot of your own personal work.
Yes.
How are you, do you mind me asking, how are you
No.
funding that?
In the early days, my main income was from teaching.
Oh, okay.
So I was working part-time 2 or 3 days a week teaching during the semesters, and then occasionally get a grant. And then, of course, you would sell the occasional print, but not so much. And then when I joined Magnum, I was able to do a lot more magazine work, assignments, and I was able to fade out the teaching in order to give more priority to doing assignments and editorial work.
Okay. And your first book was self-published, wasn't
That's right. But the first 2 or 3 were self-published.
And so you mentioned that you
were able to get a grant from the Arts Council in those days.
Right.
I mean, I think even now you can do that, but I don't apply for them now because I'm much more self-sufficient.
Okay. Would you advise us to do that?
If you've got a good body of work, yes.
Right.
But the danger is people often try and get published before they're ready.
Right.
You know, because you only really get one crack at it when you go and see publishers or you apply for grants. So you've got to make sure that you've got something that is irresistible to publish.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you're not there yet, but it's something for you, obviously,
No.
in
Yeah.
your own work you can think about in years to come. You'll sort of know when you're ready to launch.
What's the sort of minimum amount of time you spend on one project? Would it be a year? Would it be...
It varies enormously. I mean, sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10 years, sometimes you can do a project in 5 days.
Right, okay. So
It really depends. It depends entirely on the project, how much time you've got, the sort of platform that it's going to use, all those things. You sort of know when it's right to do more or less work. It just depends. Also have a crazy schedule, so that often one of the problems I have is just fitting everything in.
So it's something that you have in mind, and it's for a long time. So you take advantage of that good idea, and you build it up during several other shooting. That's how you work.
Sure. No, you often have an idea, and then you know that immediately has the potential to become a project and a show and a book, and you work towards that. And then sometimes, like with the UK shooting, it's just, over 10 years I've accumulated a lot of photographs about Britain, and I've done a whole series about Scotland as well. And that eventually, when you think there's enough work here, you can then think about trying to find the right publisher, the right place to exhibit it. So sometimes you have the title first, and then sometimes the work comes first, and then you sort of know when it's time to finish it, resolve it, and move on.
No, one more question. When you say that you use the macro, the ring flash,
yes,
to do something else than the purpose, is that a way of thinking that you use a lot in your work? That if it's not trying to use it, not it was made for. Is it for you a good way to react with technique?
Yes, I mean, it's very effective for coming in very close up. I mean, the pictures up here, taken in Port Eliot House, to get those still lives of the details of like the carpet, the ring flash is the perfect vehicle. So when I'm out shooting an assignment, I often have both cameras in my bag, and then I can literally change between the two, whenever I see the right thing. So I often keep both cameras going. It gives me a wider vocabulary. And the bigger your vocabulary, the more chance you have of articulating what you want to say.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask you about your work on Britain and how you choose the areas that interest you to shoot in? And particularly, I'm interested in any work you might have done on London, and if you haven't, why not?
Funnily enough, because when I did the Guardian project, that was a fantastic excuse to get to know Britain much better. And the one city they didn't want me to photograph in was London, because most of their readers are from London, and this was an exercise to try and show to the rest of the country that they're interested in cities like Manchester and Liverpool. So yes, indeed, London's one of the strange places where I haven't photographed enough. I've done a big project recently about Harrow, the school. I've done some things, but I want to do more. And I've got a proposal in now to try and do work around the City of London, because I think this is quite a interesting and hidden sort of part of British society that needs more exploration. So it's something I'm aware of and I'm working on. But in terms of the rest of the country, you know, I do these commissions like the Black Country, and then I'll self-motivate and go to, I'm always interested in the English seaside and the British seaside, so I try and go to different areas where I haven't been. Like every bank holiday, I'll go to a different seaside resort. That's a tradition that I have, and this is no different this year from before.
I was just wondering about the copyright of these pictures, actually, because you didn't take them.
Good question. I mean, when I ask the photographers, I say, can I use this photo myself? I mean, I only started doing that maybe about a third of the way into the project, so a few of the early ones people didn't ask. But when you do these portraits, they just give them away. I mean, I had a portrait done in Switzerland, 5 Swiss francs, I bought the file. I asked them, can I use it? They said, yes, of course, anything you want.
Oh, right. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. You only find problems if you create them. That's my philosophy in this world.
Do you carry your camera around with you all the time?
No, I only carry it when I'm working.
Okay.
It's either one thing or the other. You either do it properly or not at all.
Martin, I think a lot of your work deals with either classes of people or groups of people, communities of people. Have you ever really studied individuals and actually had spent a time with one quirky character, interesting character for any period of time and done a project on them?
Only insofar that, for example, when I was working in Hebden Bridge, you know, I was working on Crimson Dean Methodist Chapel, so we got to know everybody. I was working with my partner, she did a text to accompany that. So just occasionally there are more detailed analysis. I've made films about a particular person. I made a film about a woman who had cancer who was running a hotel called Vivienne's Hotel. So basically, not usually, but occasionally it does overlap with what I do.
And following on from that, is there a particular reason for that? Do you feel it's a lot more limited if you just restrict yourself to one person almost?
No, I mean, it's because there's only a certain amount of time in the world that you have to work, and my priority is to do projects about communities rather than individuals.
Okay.
I mean, I do a lot of portraits, you know, in the Black Country, and I often do portraits of even famous people, you know. I mean, I tend to avoid them because they're more difficult than ordinary mortals. They don't have hang-ups like celebrities do. But occasionally I get asked to do them, and I will do them.
Do you think today there is any chances for young photographers to survive? What would be your best advice?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a huge genre that we're in. You know, photography has never been bigger, and there's always that desire to have new young photographers enter the marketplace. So absolutely. The trouble is the competition is huge, and therefore you've got to be really good to make that impression. So it's a tough market out there, but the need and the desire to have new photographers is always going to be there. I mean, like even in Magnum, we're always constantly looking for new people. We just don't think they're good enough. So we have 300 people apply every year. This year we took on 3. That was a big entry for us. And we just can't get enough. You know, we want the best new people who we think have got real talent that we want to help and nurture and bring through the system. So part of my job as a curator and an editor is to constantly be looking out for new, exciting people. And also when they do books, you know, I'm looking for those books to put into our survey. So, you know, I'm as hungry as anyone else to discover new, exciting people.
I had the chance to see your some of your work about the country in Europe when you've been to 5 or 6 days, and you were able to capture some of the visual specificity of the places. So my question is about that: is those clichés that we talk about the country? I have the feeling that they really exist, and I think that is what we can see in your work. Do you think that those clichés that everybody have about country like Germany, those clichés are really existing there? They are here for some reason. I don't know.
I think clichés become clichés because they do exist. So of course, yeah. And I like clichés, and I often use clichés as my starting point, and then try and subvert them and do things with it. So it's something I always look to. So whenever I'm photographing a city or a country, I'll always try and identify the things that country is known for, not only to do the close-ups, but to do the more general scenes. And likewise with prejudice, you know, for or against, all the things that you're meant to avoid, like cliches and prejudice, I can't get enough of. Because they're always starting points to sort of rally against and work against, and that's very important. Because you can help to identify who you are by working against something as much as for it.
I'm really interested in documentary photography, of going into a place and documenting it as it is.
Yeah.
Are there any groups or organisations that I should try and contact in order to meander my way in? Because in the past I've just set up a project and done it myself without the backing of any group or body.
When you say groups, you mean groups of photographers or
both really, or organisations. I was thinking National Trust or I don't know, the libraries or some organisation.
I mean, I think you're pretty much on top of things in your vicinity, like the way you work with the record office, the way you work with the gardens. I mean, these seem to me to be perfect allies to have. Not only can they give you some budget, but it gives you a platform and a place to keep the photograph that you've accumulated. So I think you're on the right tracks, for sure. I mean, in terms of finding other photographers, there's, do you know hardcore street photography? Are you in that, Mark? No. You know about that? Yeah. 32,000 street photographers on Flickr. So there'll be different groups like that. Have you explored Flickr for the group that's right for you?
Not to its full potential in any way.
I think you should, because Flickr, I mean, okay, you see a lot of weak pictures in Flickr, but it's a fantastically lively forum with millions of members, and you know, you can just start searching for, you know, community photography, archive photography, all these groups. There'll be a group for you out there, and if there isn't one, start it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've approached a lot of facilities yourself because you were interested in documenting it, and just do that.
Yes, I mean, I try and think of what I want to do, and then find ways of getting the budget to make that happen. If I don't find the budget, I'll just do it anyway. But then often I work with people like Multistory, who are basically a community arts association whose main initial remit is to document the Black Country, and I've developed with them, they first contacted me 3 years ago, I've developed with them a very big program which includes all kinds of writers, filmmakers, oral histories, as well as photography. So, you know, we worked it out as we've gone along, so that's been a very good exercise, and they're very good insofar they've got a very motivated, smart director who can appeal and apply for money, both public and private.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
How long is your little personal list of projects that you haven't yet got to shoot but would love to shoot?
I mean, my priority at the moment is to finish, you know, this extra chapter about the UK and continue to make some films. I thought maybe this afternoon I'll show you one of the films I've done recently, because that's a whole aspect of what I love to do. And of course, you have to remember that part of my editing and creating and curating projects are very important to me. So we're working on volume 3 of the photo book. I'm doing a book about Chinese photo books, which is going to be exhibited in Arles next year. So I have a lot of projects up my sleeve that I want to continue. And then, I mean, I'm just excited still about the world. You know, when I stop being excited, then I'll know it's time to hang up my camera and do other things. But I'm still, there's so much out there that is interesting and exciting and different, and it's changing all the time. I'm still motivated by that basic curiosity and nosiness about the world, and wanting to try and understand it and get to grips with it, if you like, and find ways of making images that relate to my relationship to that world.
is the book always an end goal?
No, not at all, because there's editorial assignments, there's projects I've done which are just too thin for a book. So there's books that I'm making. I mean, next year I'll be doing a book of the black and white work that I did 30 years ago. So there's some cycles where it happens immediately and some cycles where it'll take that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the other projects that I'm doing where I'm editing. I'm going through next year, for example, Tony Ray Jones' original contact prints when he shot in the late 60s in the UK to make another exhibition, just to see if there's things that he missed. There's other curating projects that I take on board
Mm-hmm.
that are very exciting and great to be involved with.
Okay.
And also through Magnum, like we have a show now in a cafe in Margate, which sadly I wasn't able to go to, which is where they invited me to come and do a series of portraits in a particular square in Margate. And now it's in the local cafe. So there's an exhibition on that I haven't seen,
Right.
which sounds great. Because I really like this whole idea of taking work back to the place where it's made.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one audience you're going to have that is guaranteed to be interested in the work you do is the one that lives there. That's really the finish of the workshop, formally. So, in a sense, what do you need to take from this? I think, first, I hope you get more confidence in the ability to use Flash and thinking about your relationship to the subject matter, the people, and also how necessary it is to make that connection with the subject. And when we were looking at people's work on the first day, you could see a lot of potential that perhaps hasn't been fulfilled. And remember, you're not on workshops normally, so you've got to learn, if you like, to be able to navigate and improve your work by yourselves. You have to understand what is good, you have to think about your work, understand what is working, and then create more situations to make that go further. So when you find an image that works, you say, right, I'm going to recreate more pictures like that to resolve an idea. What I think you need to do is to learn to teach yourselves, if you see what I mean. So that's something I hope you take away from the workshop, this whole process, because in the end, it's down to you. Because there is an expectation when you come to a workshop, and in the end, though, you've all got to be self-motivated. That's the important thing that you've got to learn to be better at, if you like. Of course, you can go and get input, you can go to photo reviews, you can go on more workshops. You need, of course, to see plenty of shows and exhibitions to keep the excitement up about photography. But then it's down to you lot to sort of really work out how to keep going, keep the momentum. And once you've got that momentum, it's unstoppable. That's the great thing. It's just finding that track and getting onto that wheel. And once you've got it and you're excited, you don't need to attend a workshop. You don't need to read the book. You'll be so fueled up and so driven and motivated that that's when the good work will reveal itself. So really, it's just a way, if you like, of you finding that niche. Some of you have partly achieved that. Some of you have achieved that very well. And some of you have really yet to find, if you like, the thing that's going to make you excited, that's going to propel you forward. And some of you may never do that, but it doesn't matter, because you can still enjoy photography anyway, because photography is the most democratic art form the world's ever produced, and that's one of the things I love about it. And of course, the other great thing about photography is that however much you know it, you can never quite get on top of it. So even though I've been a photographer for something like 45 years, it still surprises me, and it still is quite unreliable insofar you think you know all the rules, and then suddenly it'll change and something will surprise you. So the very fact that I'm not entirely in control of what I'm doing is what keeps me excited, because it's such an enigmatic form. And I think you've all realised that, because you wouldn't have come to this workshop unless you were excited by the idea of photography. But celebrate the fact that it's so unpredictable, celebrate the fact that it does ultimately reward you with the effort you put in, is normally how good your work becomes.